Most leaders were promoted because they had the answers. But the higher you rise in your career and your organization, the more dangerous that habit becomes. Because when every problem runs through you, your team gets slower. When every answer comes from you, your people stop thinking as deeply. And when your identity becomes being the helpful problem solver, you quietly become the bottleneck. Today's guest on the Good Leadership Podcast is once again Michael Bungay Stanier, best-selling author of The Coaching Habit, one of the most influential books on coaching and leadership. Michael has helped leaders around the world do something deceptively simple and incredibly difficult. Stay curious a little while longer. In today's episode, we talk about the 10th anniversary edition of The Coaching Habit, the 7 coaching questions every leader should know, why the advice monster is so hard to tame, and why coaching does not have to be a long, formal conversation. Because in a world where AI can give people the answers faster, the leader's real advantage is no longer simply knowing more. It's helping people feel seen, heard, challenged, and capable of thinking better for themselves. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Through candid conversations and expert perspectives, we dive into the challenges, breakthroughs, and practical lessons that shape exceptional leadership. Well, let's walk through those 7 essential questions for listeners who haven't encountered them yet. First one is that kickstart question. What's on your mind? Seems deceptively simple. What makes it so powerful as an opener?
I'm going to combine that with the final question, which is the learning question, because sometimes it's powerful to learn these questions as pairs, and they can see why they work and why they're there. So one of the barriers to being more coach-like is people go, I just don't know how to start. But that kind of initial kickoff, it always feels a bit awkward. I mean, it's been a long time since I've tried to chat up somebody in a bar. I've been married for 30 some years now. But it's a bit like that line, which is like, how do I start this conversation? So the kickstart question, I think, is a really powerful way to start. And it's simply what's on your mind. What it means is if you and I are in conversation, Charles, I'm not saying to you, hey, it's our one-to-one, report out and tell me everything that's happening. A really boring conversation for both people in that conversation. It says, hey, what are you most excited about? What are you nervous about? What are you anxious about? What are you consumed by? What feels like the big thing for you right now? It's an invitation to get into it, accelerate into an interesting conversation. So what's on your mind is a really wonderful place to start. And I've sort of said this, but I'll say it again really kind of loudly. It can be a really powerful way of reinventing your one-to-ones if you hold one-to-ones with your team. Most one-to-one meetings are boring. They're boring for you and they're boring for that other person because it's kind of we're both justifying our existence meetings.
Mhm.
I'm justifying my existence by pretending I'm interested in all the stuff that you're doing as your manager. You're justifying your existence by telling me all the stuff you're doing to prove that you're a worthwhile, valuable person. And there's all sorts of ways that you can just check in on what people are up to without having to have a conversation about it. Use your one-to-ones to be as helpful as possible, as useful as you can. And what that can mean is by saying, hey, what's on your mind? What's caught your attention? What are you feeling anxious about? Because what you're really saying is, take me somewhere where I can be most helpful for you. So that's the kickstart question. Let me pair it up. So you got a bookends, start and finish, with the learning question. And the learning question is, what was most useful or most valuable for you? What was most useful or most valuable for you here? If you're a manager and a leader, part of your role is to make your people smarter, make your people better. They get that a little bit by being seen and being heard and being encouraged, but you actually want them to kind of make new neural pathways as well. And what's annoying is people don't actually know what was useful or valuable in your conversation just naturally. They, you tell people stuff, it goes in one ear, it goes out the other ear pretty quickly. What this question says is like, before you go, tell me what was helpful. Tell me what was useful. Tell me what you know now that you didn't know before. And by them naming it, they are naming it for themselves. So they get to rewire that insight in their brain, and that's going to stick. The bonus, Charles, is they then get feedback, or you get feedback. So you go, oh, that was what was helpful. Because sometimes you've had conversations where you're like, I know exactly what was most useful here. because I crushed it. I was like nuggets of gold. And it turns out that that wasn't the useful thing at all. And sometimes you have conversations where you think to yourself, I haven't been helpful at all in this. I've been a bit of a waste of time and space. And it turns out you have been useful around it. So, what was most useful or what was most valuable or what you know now that you didn't know before is a very powerful way to help them and you extract the value from the conversation.
And it does a few clever things, right? It presumes the conversation was useful,
Yeah,
which is a generous framing. It gives you feedback on what actually landed. And it ends that interaction on that aha, which taps into Daniel Kahneman's calls the peak end rule.
that's
People
right.
remember the emotional high points and the ending disproportionately more than anything else. And that's all covered in that one short question.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's cunning about this is, and you've said it, is that when people think back on what's it like working with Charles, they'll go, every conversation I have with him feels both useful and valuable. I wonder why. It's like, because you've literally said, tell me what was useful and valuable about this conversation. So you're literally constantly reframing this conversation and this relationship you have as a useful and valuable one, which serves both of you.
Love it. Well, the next question is what you call the best coaching question in the world.
The focus question is, what's the real challenge here for you? What's the real challenge here for you? And this insight, which we've touched on already, is that in organizations, people aren't working on the real challenge. They're just working on the first challenge. And one of the most powerful things you can do is just get much better at figuring out what the real challenge is. So this question, what's the real challenge here for you? It's a really powerful question. And the way it's written, the way it's, of all the 7 questions, this is the one where the words probably matter the most. It starts with the difference between what's the challenge here and what's the real challenge here. They're quite different questions. You know, if you say, so what's the challenge here? You're more likely to get a kind of almost to repeat what you've already heard when you ask what's on your mind. When you go, what's the real challenge here? You're kind of saying, well, there's a lot going on here. What do you think that's at the heart of it? What do you think the real challenge is? And you're going to make them think. You're going to make them work. So what's the real challenge? Really powerful. And then when you add for you to it, it actually means that you're not now talking about the theory. You're actually saying, here's what's hard for me in this moment. So it starts being a coaching conversation that's not just about solving the problem. It's called coaching for performance, but it's about growing the person. That's coaching for development. And you get to do both of them in a single question. So what's the real challenge here for you? Really powerful. But don't be seduced by their first answer. I mean, that's a recurring theme in this conversation. Their first answer isn't the only answer. So that's when you come in with the best coaching question in the world, which is really easy one. And what else? And what else? Man, people love this question. This is the favorite question, I think, because it just keeps the space for creativity and curiosity open. So what's the real challenge here for you? Okay, cool. What else? What else is a challenge here for you? Right. What else is a challenge here for you? Right. So what's the real challenge here for you? And that's honestly a little script that people can just write down and steal. And I promise you, where they start with what's the real challenge here for you and where they finish. So what's the real challenge here for you? They'll be different and they'll be more insightful and be more focused. And that's helpful for them, but helpful for you. Because now if you've got advice and solutions, at least they're going to be towards the right and actual issue.
Love it. How long should you be asking that? Because I've always been curious about that. And what else? Do you go
Yeah.
3 or 4 times? Is there some cue from the other person that would indicate you can move on?
Yeah. Look, the first time you do it, when you go, great, good answer, and what else? You'll probably notice the other person's eyes widen slightly. They're like, oh my God, they're gonna keep me working here. I thought I'd hit the ball back across the net, but no, you hit the ball there. Look, here's my script, Charles. I go, and what else? And what else? Is there anything else? Because is there anything else kind of says, look, we can keep going on this forever. Like, I'm happy to ride the wave. I love untapping all this in you. And by the way, they're excited as well because actually you're making them say things that they didn't even know they knew. But is there anything else says, look, we can shut the door. If we want to shut the door, we can keep the door open. If we want to keep the door open, what's going to be most helpful for you? So what's the real challenge here for you? Great. What else is a challenge? What else is a challenge? Is there anything else here that's a challenge for you? Okay. So if that's all the stuff that's on the table, what's the real challenge here for you? I mean, pick one of these for us to go deeper in.
Well, and these first three questions form this irresistible 1, 2, 3 combination, right? For a listener who's going to try one thing from this conversation tomorrow morning, can walk them through exactly how the sequence kind of plays out in a real conversation, possibly.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm sitting there with Charles. Charles, we've got our one-to-one conversation. It's fantastic. I know you're doing a ton of work. I'm excited for you, but what's on your mind? Where should we start? Where should we start is another way of saying what's on your mind. And Charles will go, well, actually, it's this, I've got this podcast interview coming up with this guy. I don't like him. I haven't read his book yet, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, so what's the challenge here for you? Like, I'm out of practice with doing podcasts. I go, great, what else? I haven't read his book and I don't have time to read his book. Okay, what else? He's got a reputation for being a prima donna and I hate prima donnas. Okay, right, great. What else? That's probably it. It's like, okay, so of all of those things, what's the real challenge here for you? Well, he's a prima donna. Okay, so what's the real challenge for you in him being a prima donna? Oh, well, he doesn't like me to send the questions beforehand, so I don't know if he's going to be prepared for the answer. I don't know what and so it goes. So you can see me just using the questions there. What's in your mind? What's the real challenge here for you? And what else? And what else? Is there anything else? So what's the real challenge here for you? And there you've got a nice 1, 2, 3 opening sequence. And you've got the final question, number 7 in the book, which is, so what was useful or valuable about this for you?
I love that. Love that framework. Well, let's move to the next question, the foundation question. What do you want? Is probably the most direct question in the book. You connect it to the Terra model. Can you walk us through what Terra is? It's an acronym and why it matters for this question.
Yeah. So what you want, I have a journal and I answer that question every morning. And it's hard every morning. It is such a good question because it actually makes you go, what do I want? It's not a question that can always be answered easily. So of the 7 questions, I use this one less frequently. I use it when I've slightly lost track of the conversation, where it feels like it's drifting, where it feels like we can't quite get to the heart of it. And I use it when I'm trying to figure out what feedback I want to give somebody. If I'm avoiding giving them feedback, avoiding a tough conversation, I'll go, well, what do I want? And once I get clear on what I want, then I get a little better at being able to exchange information to set that up so I get what I want. And it's connected to Terra. So Terra is the neuroscience of engagement. It's like, how do I keep people engaged in this conversation? And there are kind of 4 core drivers to it. Terra stands for tribe, engagement, rank, and autonomy. So tribe, the brain is going, look, are you with me or against me? So you're trying to figure out ways of making a conversation feel that you're on their side rather than against them in some way. Expectation is like, do I know what's going to happen next? So the more comfortable I feel about the future, the more likely I'm going to stay engaged with you because it feels safe. Rank feels, are you more or less important than me? So if you're giving me advice from up on high, I feel less important than you. I feel lower rank. I feel less engaged. And autonomy is, do I get to make some choices here? Or are you telling me what to do? And in general, asking good questions will raise the terror quotient because increases a sense of tribiness, certainly increases a sense of rank because you're giving them the the capacity to answer the questions and have some agency. It increases autonomy because they get to make some choices here. Sometimes it increases expectation, sometimes it lowers expectation, but overall it raises the terror quotient. And I think what do you want is a very powerful question around autonomy and agency. Because it's saying, look, I know what I want, but I'm curious to know what you want. And one of the definitions of an adult to adult relationship which is kind of what we're going for here. This is like the work behind the work behind the work. It's like, how do you build adult to adult relationships in our work? One definition of that is being able to ask for what you want, knowing that the answer might be no, and then negotiating the differences. And the starting point for that is being able to ask for what you want. So that's a really powerful question to unlock that.
And I like it because it's not just a goal setting question, like you said. It's an engagement and safety question as well.
Right. Yeah. And also just to say, recurring theme, don't be seduced by the first answer. When you go, so what do you want? They'll say something, you're like, that's great. That's powerful. What else? What else do you want? And what else do you want? So what's at the heart of this? What do you really want? And that's going to take you somewhere quite intimate, quite vulnerable, quite powerful. And from there, all sorts of interesting things can happen.
Because, like you said, many people don't understand or are not going to express their need right away. They may not even know what their
Yeah.
underlying need is. And instead of asking the 5 why questions, which is kind of condescending and more pointed, all of these questions are start with what, not why, for that very reason.
Yeah. I mean, why questions? I mean, there's a place for the 5 whys. I remember reading Peter Senge writing about those long ago and going, that's pretty helpful. The ladder of inference, as it's sometimes called. But it has to be in the right context. And in an everyday conversation, if I go, why, and it's really hard to do that in a way that doesn't sound like it's attacking me. Or it's like, justify yourself, prove yourself. I'm skeptical about whatever it is that you've got to say. Why typically is putting people on the defensive? What questions feel a little more gentle and a little more open?
Well, the next question connects to something I see constantly in organizations that I work with is how can I help? You call it the lazy question, which is a provocative name, but how does this question really connect to that Cartman drama triangle?
Yeah. So one of the curses of, I'm going to say modern day work, but it's kind of life, is people jumping in when they're not welcome and they're not wanted. And doing it with the best of intentions in mind, or at least its roots are in good intentions. But, we've all had people where we're like, what are you doing? Why are you bugging me like this? And one of the most powerful acts as a leader is you can get clear about what's on your side of the table and what's on their side of the table. And you manage your side of the table and you let them manage their side of the table. I'm going to garden my patch. You're going to garden your patch. And one of the counterintuitive powers of asking, how can I help, is it slows you rushing in to jump in and save the day and rescue the day and take it on without them. But many managers and leaders think they know what the problem is, think they know what the solution is, and start the intervention, whether they want it or not. And that's the connection with the drama triangle, Charles. So the drama triangle has its roots in transactional analysis, or TA. It's a therapeutic model that gives us things like adult to adult relationships and parent child relationships. It's therapy, doesn't really work in organizational life. But the drama triangle says, look, that when things get dysfunctional, and of course they always get dysfunctional, 3 different roles play out: the victim, the persecutor, and the rescuer. The victim is, oh, it's so hard, it's not fair. The persecutor is, you're a bit crap, I'm angry, I'm going to get it done, kind of cracking the whip. And the rescuer is, let me jump in, let me fix it, let me solve this for you. All 3 of them are equally dysfunctional, even though the rescuer sounds better than the other 2. When you ask people which of those 3 roles they most identify with, most people will say rescuer. Most people are like, yeah, that's kind of the role I tend to play. And if that's true for you as a listener, then this question, how can I help, is actually a way of slowing down your inclination to jump in and rescue her. Because when you say, how can I help, you're really saying, what do you want from me? And when people tell you what they want from you, what's powerful to remember is you can say yes to that, you can say no to that, or you can say, well, not that, but maybe this instead. You can actually decide what you want to give, and it slows you down from leaping in and moving into rescuer mode.
I see rescuer as probably the most common. of those because that's the default setting for most nice, high achieving managers,
Yeah,
right? Let me jump in and fix it and save the day. It feels noble, but the price is high because you burn out, your people become codependent, and you unintentionally keep everyone stuck in dysfunction.
that's right. That's exactly right.
And I love how you say how I can help because I feel that that would elicit a richer, more accurate description of the problem and is probably rated by the person that you're in communication with as more effective and more empathetic in the end. You get the same benefit and you resist the urge to prescribe.
That's right. So if you go, okay, so what's the challenge here for you? And what else? So what's the real challenge here for you? Okay, so if that's the real challenge here, what do you want from me? I mean, how can I help? And you can see what a powerful invitation towards agency and support here. It's like you're saying, I've kind of got your back as best I can, but I'm not going to presume anything. And what's brilliant is half the time people go, look, I don't need anything from you. I need you to leave me alone so I can crack on with this and actually get going on this and figure some stuff out myself. And you're like, I love that answer. Carry on. Yeah.
Love it. Well, let's talk about the question that connects to strategy. If you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? And you quote Michael Porter's definition of the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do.
Yeah.
So, how do you help people actually execute on the no when an organizational culture always defaults to a yes?
Well, I think that's the first thing to realize, which is like we are so good at adding yeses onto our lives. And anybody who's feeling just a smite overwhelmed at the moment, you get what I'm talking about, which is like, oh, I've got a lot on my plate. And strategy is not just saying no to the stuff you want to say no to. It's saying no to the stuff you want to say yes to. Because you're like, I can't actually have all of these things. And if I say too many yeses, it just dilutes all the yeses. So one of the most powerful things for you to be asking, and this will raise your status in your organization, is when people make a decision. If you go, if we're saying yes to this, what are the things and what are the people and what are the commitments and what are the costs that we're saying no to really make that happen? And it will be awkward, but it is the essence of being strategic. And it's really powerful. And if you think to yourself, the people, overcommitted, people on my team are overcommitted, my boss is overcommitted. If you're recognizing this, then make this one of your go-to questions, which is like, look, I'm super excited to say yes to this once we've decided what we're going to say no to, because none of us have any capacity. We don't have any time or money or capacity for this. So what we're going to have to say no to something.
Love it. You also mentioned too that just move to yes more slowly before you agree. Like you said, ask some clarifying questions. Perhaps, why me? What does success look like? By when? If I say yes to this, what are you expecting me to drop? Because what
Yeah.
I've seen is often just that curiosity reveals the request is somewhat vague, misdirected, and possibly negotiable.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people are asking you to do things because you've got a pulse and you're the first person that they thought of. And if you're like, oh, it's, yeah, okay, maybe. I mean, what exactly do you want me to do and when by? And what would we need to remove for me to do this? And what does success look like? There's one very human truth here is that if you become a bit of a effort for somebody to convince to be a yes, they'll go find somebody who says yes more quickly than you. And that allows you to stay focused on the work that makes a real difference.
That's an important distinction. Thank you. Well, part of the book too is around building new habits, and you have a great habit formula that when this happens, instead of doing this, I will do this. What's the most common mistake people make when they try to build their coaching habit?
Well, mostly it's trying to do too much, too fast, too quickly with too many other people. The work of BJ, the work of Leo Babauta and Zen Habits, the work of James Clear, of course, whose book on Atomic Habits came after all of those other books, but kind of people may have heard of the book Atomic Habits. It's sold 8,000 million copies by now, I think. And it takes a while to build a new habit because you're not just starting a new behavior, you're trying to unlearn some old behaviors. So my version of the habit, which builds on Charles Duhigg's work and others, and when this happens, that's the trigger in this situation. Instead of, that's when I define the old habit, which is like giving advice typically. I will ask this question. And so for people who are listening in here and going, what am I going to do with all of this stuff? Because Charles, you and I have covered a lot of ground in the hour or so we've been talking. It's like, so who's a person you'd like to build a bit more of a coaching habit with? Might be somebody on your team, it might be your boss, it might be your kid, it might be your partner. And when's a time where you'd particularly like to be curious rather than advice giving? In the car on the way home from school, in the one-to-one meeting, in the team retreat, I don't know, find a time. And if there's only one question you could practice, what would be the question that feels like it might be the most useful? Take your best guess at that. So it's like start small. It's like just going to a gym. Like if you're going back to get fit again, you don't go in and go, I'm going to try and chest press. You start small, you start figuring it out, you start understanding the mechanism of how to do a chest press. So pick a question, pick a person, pick a moment, and see if you can practice that.
Love it. Great advice. I also see this a lot in organizations that when people are trying to coach someone, that you're kind of coaching the ghost you mentioned. That dynamic where someone spends 10 minutes telling you about their terrible boss or that difficult colleague or that dysfunctional department, and you end up coaching this absent third party. What are some of the most effective ways to redirect without making that person shut down?
Yeah. It is very tempting when somebody says, you go, what's the challenge here? And you go, yeah, it's Charles. Charles is the challenge. And I'm like, you're right. Charles is a nightmare. I get that. And they're like, exactly. You understand me. I'm like, I see you. I hear you. Charles, you're a terrible person. And you spend your whole time moaning about Charles or the strategy or about the competitor or about whatever it might be, the problem. But you're not coaching the problem. You're coaching the person's relationship to the problem. So that's where that two-word phrase can be so powerful, which is for you. What's the challenge here for you? It's not what's the challenge with Charles. It's what's the challenge with Charles for you. And what that does is it brings the person who you're talking to, you're coaching, back into being the center of the conversation. It's like, yeah, I get that. But what's hard about this for you? I once coached the head of sales for Microsoft in Las Vegas in front of 4,000 people from the sales organization. And of course, if you're head of sales for Microsoft, you're head of a 30,000 person organization. It's a pretty big deal. And when I sat down with him, JP, I was like, so what's on your mind? He goes, well, here's where we're at in sales in Microsoft. I'm like, yeah, okay, but what's the challenge here for you in all of that? He goes, well, sales is this, and we're emerging business model. And blah. I'm like, yeah, but what's the challenge here for you in all of this? He goes, yeah, well, I've got this team and we're doing this and they're doing that. And I'm like, yeah, but what's the challenge here for you in all of this? And I just spent 10 minutes going, yeah, but for you, JP, what's the challenge? And we finally got to this powerful piece, which is like, look, I've got to trust my leadership team a bit more and be a bit more hands off. And I'm like, that's the challenge for you. It takes a bit of practice, but there's a persistence in going, do I understand what's hard about this for the person I'm coaching? Not just what's juicy about this as a challenge in an HBR type of way.
That's a great reframe. Well, we've been talking mostly about questions likely managers can ask of their teams. Let's flip it. What's a question you wish employees would ask their managers more often?
Well, and what else is a go-to? Because when your boss goes, hey, this, you can only go, well, that's the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and they absolutely know what they're talking about. But if you go, great, okay, that sounds like one of the things. What else is on your mind? What else is hard? What else is a challenge here for you? One of the key invitations of the book is to say, you can be coach like without turning everything into a coaching session. In fact, if I sit down with you and go, hey, I'm coaching you now, something shifts, something gets a bit weird in the conversation. If I'm like just naturally curious, we don't even have to label it coaching. We can just talk about it as a conversation where I ask you some questions. So you can sit down with your boss and your boss goes, well, look, here's the hard thing at the moment. And I'm like, great. So what's the challenge here for you? Oh, so what else is hard? Okay, so how can I help? What do you want from me? These are all questions that work regardless of status and power. But it's about having a degree of confidence around that to say, look, it's okay for me to ask a question.
Another question that I think that might be appropriate, and let me know if it is an employee can ask, what does success look like for you in this project or in our working relationship? A version of the foundation question, right? Pointed at your boss.
An incredibly powerful thing if you know what your boss cares about and what your boss's boss cares about. Because work is political, and political means what the people in power want, and you try and figure out ways of making them look good and get what they want. So it can be easy to assume you know what your boss wants, what matters to them. It can be easy to stumble into all sorts of problems because you get that wrong. I remember a client once, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I knew what they wanted. I gave them what I thought they wanted. It was the opposite of what they wanted. I was a consultant at the time. I never worked with them again. And in fact, her last words to me were, and I will ensure you will never work in this organization ever again. Now, I did. It was a bit of a dramatic sign off, but it was me completely not getting clear on where the power laid and what they wanted.
Yeah, it's making that implicit explicit and making it part of that conversation. You're
Yeah.
right. Well, some of the new parts of this 10th anniversary edition, want to get into some of those. You brought in your friend Eric Klein to add that graphic novel element to the book. What do illustrations add that words alone couldn't accomplish to this new edition?
Well, they add beauty and whimsy and fun. There are squirrels, there are dogs, there are clouds. But really, what the illustrated element of it adds is a way of making apparent some of the deeper lessons of the book in a way that is kind of gentle and just a little less blunt that sometimes words can be. And what I hope is it's like not everybody loves to read a book. I love to read a book. I'm a reader, but not everybody loves that. So what I'm hoping is it also makes the book feel a bit more playful and a bit more accessible for people as well. They're like, I can skim the words, but I can linger on the little graphic novel. There's like 8 short chapters of this graphic novel that people will work through and get an experience of. So I'm quite excited about that. It's I mean, I like the extra chapters that I've written. We've got the one that we've implied, which is the being of coaching. There's a downloadable chapter about how to construct a good coaching question, and another one about how you bring coaching to parenting. But the biggest visual difference is this kind of graphic novel experience, and it looks fantastic.
I would agree that illustrated, more playful edition, it makes it lowers the barrier to entry. And it signals to me that it's not just some heavy academic text. It's approachable, human, maybe even a little fun, which makes it easier for those skeptical or time pressed managers to actually want to open it and read it. And you just mentioned too, you've also included the secret, not secret chapters that they can download separately, one on building your own coaching questions and another on applying the coaching habit as a parent. Why did you hold these back from the book itself and or from the original version? Why release them now?
It's a kind of design question. And one of the things that I think about with the books that I write is what's the shortest book that I can write that would be most useful? Because it is, look, it's hard and often a bit miserable writing a book. You go through all sorts of drafts where you kind of hate yourself, hate the idea, hate yourself and the idea. But eventually, if you end up with a book, you realize that that's the easy bit compared to trying to get people to buy the book because people are besieged by books. AI means that you can, whip out a book in 8 minutes now. So people have too many books. There aren't many people I know who go, I've read all the books on my bedside table and I'm on top of my reading. Like nobody says that. So you have to get people to buy the book. Then you have to get people to read the book. Like, I don't know about you, Charles, but I've got all these books that I'm so looking forward to reading at some stage, and I haven't read them yet. And I'm not quite sure when I'm going to find the time to do that. So with the original version of the book and then with this one, I'm like, how do I make this feel like it would be a delight to read? And every word you add makes the book a bit longer, which makes it a bit less likely that people will get to the end. So I wanted to add this chapter on the being of coaching because I think that's really powerful. And I wanted to be able to say here's something new in the book. But the other 2 chapters, I'm like, they feel like they stand alone. And it feels like if people are keen on constructing a question, you can go there. Not everybody will be. If you're keen on parenting and coaching, you can go there. Not everybody will be.
That's some great insight. And I wish more authors would think the same way because they just keep adding more and more to their book. But I love how you keep that core promise. Under 2 hours, you can still read this and be more coach like. And if you want to go further, deepen your question craft or your parenting, that's available, but it doesn't weigh the book down.
Yeah. And honestly, we can blame the authors, but often you have to blame the publishers who go, we want your book to be 240 pages long for no reason other than 240 pages feels more valuable than 120 pages. And I'm like, is it though? Or is it just more words?
Exactly. As part of this release of the 10th anniversary edition, you're also launching the Coaching Habit podcast in 2026 to celebrate the anniversary. Talk to us more about that. What are you hoping for the podcast and what can it do that the book alone can't?
It's a good question because we're still trying to figure out what that podcast is. We've gone through about 8 different ideas and we haven't quite landed on the answer yet. I think it's going to be a cross-generational conversation between me and a 27-year-old, taking bits of advice that we've read or we've seen on TikTok or whatever, and looking at them together and reacting to those 2 pieces of advice. There's a lot of stuff coming at people around how to do stuff and how to live their lives. And I think that Coaching Habit podcast is going to be us poking at that and going, what's good advice and what's not good advice if you're 58 like I am or you're 27 like Hussein is.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to listening to that. Before we close, Michael, if I were coaching you right now using your own framework, I would close with a learning question. So let me turn it on you. What's been the most useful for you in reflecting on 10 years of the coaching habit?
What's lovely for me is being able to reflect on 10 years of the coaching habit. We're recording this in the time of the Winter Olympics. And I was just thinking about the closing ceremony, which hasn't happened yet, but it's coming up soon, and how it's a forced moment of celebration. Like there's nothing else to do. Everybody's run their races, got their medals. You've done your thing. And, if you're an athlete, you mostly spend your life training or competing, and there's not a whole lot of stopping and celebrating. And this feels like a moment where they get to stop and celebrate. And it's true with an author as well. Like you spend your time writing books or trying to sell books or writing the next book. So an opportunity to stop and reflect on the fact that after 10 years, people are still interested in talking to me about the coaching habit. That feels kind of cool.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for a great conversation today. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you, learn more about your work, and where they can pick up the new 10th anniversary edition of the Coaching Habit.
Yeah. So if you're curious about this new coaching habit, mbsworks.shop is the place to go. We've got different levels of power-ups, which means different levels of how you want to get engaged in the book. They're all ways of having more fun and deepening your coaching capacity. The first level doesn't even cost you any money, so it's worth checking out because it's a bunch of free stuff. But then there's different ways of getting more involved as you wish. And then in general, if you'd like to find out what I'm up to, so mbsworks.shop and mbs.works are the 2 places to go poke around.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Michael. And here's my takeaway for you, the listener. The single most powerful behavior change you can make as a leader is deceptively simple. Ask one more question before you give advice. As Michael puts it, stay curious a little longer. That's not a weakness. And in a world where AI can give you the answer faster and probably better than you can, being curious is a unique human advantage. So thank you for joining us for the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm Charles Good. Keep learning, keep leading, and keep asking, and what else? I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.